I'll try to move over. I like when people sit in the front row. Very often I have a situation where really long, old, traditional churches where they've got 30 or 40 rows here, and when I'm doing the presentation, I have to go halfway down because nobody's sitting from pews.
I didn't notice you had a speaker.
I do now.
Want us all to sit on the same side, did you say?
Sorry?
Did you say we should all sit on that side?
No. You can sit wherever.
Just not in the back.
Yeah. Yeah, I was telling Pastor after the service, this is not the first time this has happened, and I don't know why it is, but like right as the service began, I got a frog in my throat. I was doing fine before that, but it just boom, and then it's harder to talk. Yeah, but.
We just thought you were doing it in the ritual.
All right, well, looks like we're set to go. So again, I am Pastor Jeff Samuelson, and I'm from Christian Life Resources. I was just playing with this and got it working. There we go. You don't have to read everything on there. It's just because people sometimes wonder who I am and where I came from. I've been the Director of Ministry Advancement at Christian Life Resources since April of 2021, so it's coming up on 2 years now. Prior to that, I spent almost 21 years at another Christ Lutheran Church, that one in Clarksville, Maryland, which is about halfway between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. I am a second career student or pastor, and my first career was with the United States Foreign Service, so I was with the Department of State for 5 years prior to that, and my bachelor's degree is from Washington University in St. Louis in political science. Anyway, I've titled this, there we go, We've Got Issues. The way I've got this set up is I'll give some basic background about our organization, Christian Life Resources. Then I'll open it up if you have any questions or comments. If you end up being the kind of group that doesn't have any questions or comments, then I'll talk some more. I've got material I can talk about, but it usually works a lot better if you have things that you want to talk about rather than just working with things I want to talk about. So, all right. Our history as an organization. I'm sure the problem is not with your clicker. It's just whatever this is. Most of you are probably aware that in 1973, the Supreme Court, in its Roe v. Wade decision, legalized abortion throughout the United States and effectively legalized it through all 9 months of pregnancy. When this happened, it took most Americans and most American Christians pretty much by surprise. It had not really been on most people's radar. And to the extent that it was seen as a Christian issue at all, it tended to be seen as a Catholic issue, that the Protestants weren't getting all that, upset about or whatever. And when it happened, there was a long time, it was like, well, this doesn't sound good. What should we do about this? Can we undo this? And basically, it took a while for conservative, non-Catholic Christians in the United States to get organized, to realize this is something that we care about and we should be doing something about, and if we don't do something, nothing is going to be done. We need to do something here. And so it took a while. Well, in the late 70s, finally, a group of WELS Lutherans at St. John's Lutheran Church in Libertyville, Illinois, which is the northern Chicago suburbs, they worked together with their pastor and with members and pastors from some other area congregations. They decided, we're going to do something about this abortion thing. We're going to open a pregnancy counseling center. We're going to work with women who are possibly considering abortion, and we're going to try to convince them not to have an abortion, and at the same time, we want to tell them about Jesus. And so they opened the first center I may have to walk right up there. In Palatine, Illinois, which is also the northern suburbs of Chicago, I'll just try to talk from over here. This will probably be more effective. In 1980, Palatine, Illinois, also in the northern suburbs of Chicago. Very quickly after that, other Wells Lutherans throughout the country said, hey, we care about abortion too, we want to do that. And so they started opening, pregnancy counseling centers of their own. And it didn't take long after that happened for the groups all together to say, we're all doing the same thing. It makes sense for us to work together. So then in 1983, a national organization was formed. Now, the first group in Libertyville, Illinois, when it incorporated, called itself, very simply, Lutherans for Life. Great name. Unfortunately, at roughly the same time, down here in the Twin Cities, there was a group of mostly Missouri Synod Lutherans that also cared about abortion getting organized, and they called themselves Lutherans for Life. Now, we could have fought and probably could have won a fight over the name, but we really didn't think it was worthwhile. And so when we incorporated as this national organization, we called ourselves Wells, Lutherans for Life, just to distinguish ourselves. Eventually we began to decide, that probably wasn't, the ideal way to do it, but that is what we did. In 1983, that means this year we are celebrating our 40th anniversary as an organization. Well, didn't take too much longer for people to realize we need more organization than just a loose confederation. And so we decided in 1988 to call a national director, and that was Pastor Bob Fleischman, who is still the national director of our organization. Well, after he got involved on boards, very soon this type of stuff that we were asked to deal with, that particularly he was asked to deal with, just mushroomed. Because finally we had somebody there whose job was to stay on top of life issues. And people realized, well, this has to do with more than abortion. There are all sorts of other issues of birth control, and then what do we do about issues at the end of life, and all these other things. And so what we were dealing with as an organization was growing and growing and growing. And while we were still doing the same work we'd always done with our pregnancy counseling centers, there was a lot more to it than that. We also realized that we wanted not to be known as just the group for the Wells, but we wanted to be known as somebody who's working for Christians all throughout the country, even the world, providing things that we are uniquely prepared to provide. And so in 1999, we changed our name to Christian Life Resources. And that is, the name that we're going to be working with for all the time being, I think. A number of our pregnancy counseling centers still technically have Wells Lutherans for Life in their name, but as a national organization, we are Christian Life Resources. Now, any Christian organization you'd like to say is founded on the same things. It's not always true, so I need to spell it out with us. We, as an organization, are founded on Scripture. Don't have time to go through all of the passages that I'm referencing here. Psalm 139, these are the passages where it says, "Behold, I am fearfully and wonderfully made." The Psalm 51, verse 5, where David, in his great Psalm of Confession, says, "Behold, I was sinful from birth, sinful from the time my mother conceived me," making it very clear that we exist not just as ideas in God's minds, but as unique human individuals with souls and spiritual responsibility from the time of conception, not just from birth. Genesis 9, 5, and 6, where God, after the flood, makes sure Noah and all subsequent generations understand that he's the one who gets to decide when someone lives or dies. And then Exodus 20:13 is the fifth commandment, "You shall not murder." So these and many, many, many other passages make very clear what the Bible has to say about life and where the principles there come from. We can also say that we as an organization are founded on love. Love for God and love for our neighbors, even for our enemies. The Matthew 22 passage there is when Jesus is asked, what is the greatest commandment? And he answers with love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. John 13 is, by this all men shall know that you are my disciples, that you love each other. Matthew 5, 44 and 45 out of the Sermon on the Mount, where we're told to love our enemies and pray for those who persecute us. And of course, there are many, many, many other passages that talk about love. One was the second reading today from 1 John. Another way that we can talk about our foundation as an organization is that we are founded on a principle, the principle of God's authority. That God alone has the right and the power to initiate and terminate life. This is really, really fundamental. God alone has the right and the power to initiate and terminate life. You can find this all throughout Scripture, but perhaps the clearest statement of that is in Deuteronomy 32. Children of Israel are getting ready to enter the promised land. God is speaking through Moses to kind of reset the table for them as they start this new life and existence of the nation. And he says, now see that only I am he, and there is not a God comparable to me. I put to death, and I make alive. And that's echoed somewhat in Hannah's song when she says, the Lord puts to death, and he makes alive. He brings down to the grave, and he raises up. There's a verse, though, that I have found particularly helpful in just kind of explaining the scope of what we're about and what God is interested in regard to all these life issues, life and family issues. And that's the idea of God's authority over our times. In Psalm 31, the psalmist says, I trust in you, O Lord. I say, you are my God. My times are in your hand. Well, if we're talking about the times of our lives, well, what do we think first of? We think normally first of the beginnings of our lives. Well, what's that going to include? Well, that means that God, what we recognize as being in God's hands, things that he's concerned about, and therefore we share his concern about, are going to be matters of sex and marriage, because that's where life is supposed to come into existence. It's going to come to matters of fertility treatments, contraception, pregnancy, abortion, birth, infancy, baptism, reproductive technologies, all that kind of stuff. We're saying, well, our times are in God's hands. Beginnings, this has to do with all of that. The other thing we tend to think of when we're talking about our times in God's hands, or the next logical thing, is the ends of our lives, which means that God has concern about, and we share the concern about, with all the questions that go with, pulling the plug, so to speak, when somebody's at the end of life. Hospice care, palliative care, euthanasia, assisted suicide, matters of medical directives and things like that. These are all things that deal with the end of life, and clearly God has something to say about these, and so therefore do we. But if we're talking about our times in God's hand, and we've talked about the beginnings, and we've talked about the ends, it means we are also going to be talking about everything that is in between, which means these are life and family issues that matter to God and therefore matter to us. All sorts of things, childhood and youth and sexuality, homosexuality, marriage, family, medical ethics, health issues, health care, eugenics, race, government policies, transgenderism, vaccines even, all this wide range of stuff. These are all part of the times of our lives that are in God's hands, and therefore his word has something to say about, and we have something to say about. And so this is, begins to show the scope of things that we're dealing with. Now, as an organization, we can't do everything. And so I find it helpful to point out what is not our focus. We are not the pro-life organization that you're going to find down at the local Planned Parenthood clinic, marching around with signs. That's not what we do. We're also not the group that is going to be trying to find somebody on social media or cable news to pick a fight with. That's not us. We're not the group that is going to be passing around a petition to say, okay, this is the thing that we need to change, and let's all get together and, lobby Congress or the legislature or whatever. We are also not the group that is going to be heavily into political action. Let's make sure we get this candidate elected or that candidate elected. Now, in saying we're not doing those things, we're not saying that all those things are wrong. What we're saying that is, in the first place, we don't have the reach or the resources to do a lot of that stuff. In some cases, it's because as a Christian organization, it's not really appropriate for us to be doing that, particularly with some of the political stuff. It's great for Christian citizens to be doing that, but as a church organization, it's inappropriate for us to be saying, this is the guy who should be president, or this is these are the people who should be, in the legislature or whatever. And granted, some of these things sometimes, particularly with the fight picking and such, those aren't really Christian. We're not going to be involved with some of that stuff. But the main thing is that we don't want to be doing anything that puts up walls. It is possible to be absolutely 150% correct in what we say about life issues and family issues and sexuality and things like that, and be absolutely 150% wrong in the way that we say it. We don't want to, take a stand or say something or whatever in a way that is going to make the very people that we're trying to reach tune us out and not listen to anything that we have to say. And that's going to go both in terms of one-on-one, like if we're at a pregnancy counseling center, if we're trying to help a woman who's pregnant and wondering what she's going to do, we don't want to speak in such a way or act in such a way that she says, well, I don't want to hear about your Jesus. You sound like a real jerk. We also don't want to be speaking publicly in a way that other people will say, every stereotype I've ever heard about a Christian pro-lifer, you've just fulfilled it. I don't want to hear anything that you have to say. You've just proved to me how wrong you are. No, we always want to be careful not to put up those walls that shut people off. Why is that? Well, there's a practical aspect. We're not able to achieve what we're trying to achieve if we turn people off. But there's a more important spiritual aspect of it, which is that as a Christian organization, as Christian individuals, our goal in dealing with other people always is trying to get the gospel to them. Yes, we want to stop abortions. Yes, we want to convince people that euthanasia is wrong. All of that kind of stuff. But first and foremost, we want to have a chance to tell sinners about their Savior Jesus. And if the way we deal with things puts up walls, then we never get that chance. So how do we say it instead? We say that our mission as Christian Life Resources is to use life and family issues as bridges to convey the love of God and to share the message of salvation through Christ. We love because He first loved us. Now, it's going to be different in all sorts of different situations, how we go about this. Sometimes we're going to be more effective than others, whatever, but this is our mission, this is our goal. We never want to be so focused on getting this win or that victory that we forget about the fact that we really are all about the gospel, because that's our most fundamental mission as Christians and as the church. All right, so what does that mean we actually do as an organization? Well, our work can generally be divided into 3 areas, and they all overlap and they're interrelated, but this is just kind of I find a helpful way of dividing things. In the first place, we are sometimes called a think tank. Think tank in the sense that we're doing the kind of academic or intellectual work so that other people can take advantage of that. We also do education and advocacy work. And then we also organize for service and activity. Okay, as a think tank, what does that mean? It means we do theology. Sometimes we kind of get the impression that, well, all the theology's been done already. It's the same Bible, it's always been there. What new is there? Well, what happens is that there'll be some, for instance, new medical or technological development or whatever that never existed before, and suddenly there's a question. Well, what does that mean for us as Christians? Is this something we can take advantage of, or is it something we should not take advantage of? We have to deal with these questions. And even with that, or apart from that, sometimes things that were, theology that was done 50 years ago that was expressed very well and spoke to that culture very well doesn't speak so well to the culture today. It's not that the theology has changed, we just have to express it in a different way that actually resonates with people and they understand better. So we go to Scripture, we see what God has to say about various issues. We also, in relation to that, do research on various life and family issues, which means we watch and we interpret and we stay current on new developments, whether that's something related to abortion or something related to medical technologies or what happens to be going on in another country in regards to euthanasia or something like that. We try to stay on top of all of that. Part of this is so that we are able to do this next part, which is to counsel pastors and teachers, staff ministers, and lay people on life and family issues. Don't do this as much as we used to directly, mainly because we've done so much writing on this, people don't feel the need to pick up the phone and call us as much. But we still get phone calls, we still get emails from people if say, I've got a question on this. A lot of them come from pastors. And it's not that pastors are completely lacking knowledge on these issues. Usually what it is it's like, I read everything, I remember what we learned in seminary, and I've read the stuff on your website, but I've got this member, and their family is dealing with this issue, and there's this wrinkle to it that I've never encountered before. What should I know? What should I remember? And that's the kind of thing that we help pastors with and help laity with. Usually Pastor Fleischman takes those phone calls and answers those emails. I get them occasionally. I've had calls with lay people. I had a few months back. They were in their 30s. They'd been married for a while, hadn't had kids yet, wanted kids. They just wanted some basic advice about, when we do fertility treatments, what's acceptable for us as Christians and what's not? Where do we draw those lines? How do we, look at this in the right way? And I had talks with people, our dad's in the hospital. We're talking about putting him in hospice, but we're not sure what's going to happen if we do that. If we do X, are we actively causing his death, or are we simply allowing what is natural to happen, and those are the kinds of issues that people have, and we're here to help with. And then we provide research, guidance, and all sorts of things as requested to the WELS, also the ELS and its constituent bodies. Occasionally there'll be something that the Conference of Presidents will come to us and say, we're getting all sorts of questions about this from bubbling up. You guys probably are in a better position to research this, or maybe you already have researched this. What can we tell them? And so we're happy to help with that. And occasionally we do put out public statements and papers and things like that on issues. We don't do that too often, but we do occasionally. Now, as far as education and advocacy, this is probably what we're most visible with. Come on. First of all, it's what I'm doing right now, preaching and presenting at WELS and ELS churches and schools, being a guest speaker. Yeah, it does. Yeah. I tried my own, which I brought with me, and the battery on that was apparently completely dead. So this is an improvement, believe it or not. If I could spend an hour just showing you any single thing from our resources, it would be our website, christianliferesources.com. I haven't counted them myself. I'm told we have over 1,000 articles there on all sorts of different topics. We have Q&A there and various things there. If you have a question about some life or family issue, chances are we've got something on our website about it. That's one of the reasons why I was saying we don't get as many phone calls and emails, because people can go to the website and they already find the answers there or helpful things there. We have some publications, Clearly Caring, in your folders that you picked up. We've got samples of many of these things that we put out. And on the website, we have various downloadable resources, the worship materials. Much of that was used for today's service came from our website. We also have various things for classroom materials, Bible studies, and various forms. We have email newsletters and social media, particularly Facebook and Instagram. If you're on those, please like our pages, and you'll get regular updates from them. And the thing something that we're really excited about, we started this about 1.5 years ago, is the Life Challenges podcast. I don't know how many of you listen to podcasts. It's about 30 to 40 minutes every week. It comes out on Tuesdays. It's me and Pastor Fleischman and a volunteer, Mrs. Krista Potratz, and talk about all sorts of things, abortion, euthanasia, sexuality issues, parenting, suffering, pain, wide range of things. We just passed, right after Christmas, 10,000 downloads, which is a pretty major milestone we're pretty excited about, and we've been getting really good response to this, that the people who actually listen to it are saying, hey, this is good stuff. So we're excited about that, and I encourage you, if you have time when you're driving, when you're working out, just doing housework or yard work or something like that, it's a good thing, and you can find it at lifechallenges.us. Okay, if you want to learn more, please get on our mailing list. No obligation, of course, but I'm going to send this around. If you're interested in that, some of you may already be on our mailing list, but you'll get our email. If you give us your email address, then you'll get our email newsletters. And if you give us your physical address, then you'll get the occasional mailing of our publications and some of the other things that you saw in your folders there. So I encourage you to do that. No obligations, of course, but if you could pass that around, that would be great. Now, as far as organization for service and action, well, we still do what we started off doing, which was having this network of pregnancy care centers. The closest one to you locally, of course, is Christian Life Ministries, which is down in the Twin Cities. I forget which... Little Canada, yeah. We've got, it kind of depends on how you number them. We've got between 10 and 12 of those still. We don't have as many as we used to, and they're not as active as they used to be. That's not the greatest thing. We hope to turn that around the other direction. Many of you can probably guess, if you think about it, why it is we don't have as many and they're not as active. It's because the people who in the 1980s and 90s were really active and committed and gung-ho about getting these organizations going and staffing them have gotten older, and they no longer have the energy and the time and the resources to do that, and by and large they haven't been replaced by younger people stepping up and stepping in. Another factor is that the work itself has changed. Now, when we first got started back in the 80s, it was a very simple and effective approach to things. A woman would come in, not being absolutely certain whether she's pregnant or not, but frightened that she is, uncertain of it. So she would come in, we'd do the things that are necessary to do a pregnancy test, and in the hour or so it took for the results for that test to come back, she would sit down with one of our counselors, and that counselor would talk about, well, this is what's actually going on inside you. This is how, life and how it develops, and this isn't just a blob of tissue. This is, a real human life, wonderful gift, and at the same time present law and gospel so that they'd have a chance to hear about Jesus. And then after about an hour, when the results were back, then they'd be able to say, okay, well, here it is. You are pregnant, and this is what can happen, or perhaps you're not pregnant, and this is what's going to go on. Well, that worked really well in the 1980s when a pregnancy test, if you went to the doctors or whatever, would cost you $50 or more, and that was a lot of money for somebody, particularly who was impoverished. I haven't looked myself, but I have it on good authority that you can now buy a pregnancy test at the dollar store. And it's pretty much instantaneous. So that model doesn't work so well anymore. And so it tends to be that the people who come into our centers, the women who come into our centers, already know they're pregnant. And they're looking for help of various sorts. And I think that particularly after the Dobbs decision, which undid Roe v. Wade this past year, we're going to be seeing more people coming in who maybe they're not consciously thinking or saying it, well, I would have gotten an abortion, but I can't now. But they're going to be more like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm pregnant, and how can you help me? So what most of our centers now do is much more a matter of encouragement and support. If you keep your baby, we're going to stand here with you. We're going to provide you with diapers and wipes. Do you need a car seat for your child? We're going to do that. We're going to make sure that you cannot say, I have to get this abortion because I can't afford it. That's the kind of help that we're trying to give. And of course, mentoring as, here's how to be a good parent. These are the things that you need to know. These are resources we can connect you to and things like that. So in many respects, our work has changed with the centers, but it's also expanded. And so we've got a lot of work to do there. And I can just say anecdotally, we are getting a lot more people saying, hey, we want to do something like that in the wells. And so we're trying to get organized and get the resources together that we need to be able to expand in that way. That's more than I usually talk about at that point. It must be on my mind. We still have branches and affiliates. These are things that are not the centers, but groups within congregations or groups of congregations getting together, to have do various work. There are various volunteer opportunities, and a big one that we started back 1993, so this is its 30th anniversary. New Beginnings, which is a home for mothers. We started this originally out in the Denver area. Some years back we moved it to Milwaukee just because we needed to have it closer for supervision and such. But this was born basically because Pastor Fleischman was being interviewed by a journalist and basically was challenged with this idea, which is commonly thrown at pro-lifers. All you care about is making sure that babies are born, and after that you don't care about the mother or the kid. And of course that's not true, but he said, well, we need to be able to say, prove, have something to point to, and it proves that. And so we started New Beginnings, which is a home for single mothers. It's not a maternity home, which was the old model of, the teenage girl got herself pregnant, and I'm putting that in quotes because it was an embarrassment to everybody, and so they'd send her off to a maternity home somewhere. She'd have the baby, put it up for adoption, and then she'd go back home and pretend that nothing had happened. That was the old model of a maternity home. That's not what New Beginnings is. New Beginnings, very often the women who come to us, they've already had their kids. And they're coming to us to learn how to escape from the cycle of generational poverty that was just generation after generation of choices that don't get you anywhere, and bad parenting and all these kinds of things. And so we teach them, not just about Jesus, although that is key, but we teach them, well, here's how to be a good parent. These are the lessons that you may never have learned from anyone in your life. We're going to teach them to you. We help them get education and vocational training that they might need. In some cases, it's finishing a high school. Some cases, it's finishing, getting through college. We even have just graduated a woman who found her calling in learning to be a welder. And that's good for her. And so that's what we're doing. The thing is, it's a wonderful program. Many people from the outside have looked at it and said, this is great. But the facility we've been in is small, can handle at most 4 mothers and their kids. And frankly, it's not in the greatest shape. And so last year, actually it was more like 2 years ago now, we decided we got to do something. And so we've started a project to build a new home that will be able to handle 10 to 12 mothers. It's new property, new building. We've got the property, and now we're at the point of trying to raise the money to pay for it. It's estimated at about $5 million that we need. But we're really excited about it. If that is something that you are interested in at all, whether you're self-supporting or somebody who might be interested in it, we're calling it the Heart Campaign. Certainly more information on the web, but I also have with the folders there, the white envelope has a great deal more detailed information, and please take one of those with you.
Is that facility in Milwaukee as well?
Yes, yeah. In fact, it was one of those things where you're like, yeah, I don't think we can credit anybody but God with this one. We found a piece of property on the northwest side of Milwaukee that, when I was first told about it, I was like, how is it even possible this is available? And then the price that we were able to get it for, it's like, that can't be. Let's jump on this right now. We got the property for something like $200,000, and it's in close to Route 45 as it goes around. It's the Good Hope and 107th, if you have any idea what that is, right near the Park Place development or whatever. And we're like, yeah, this is perfect. And so, that was just one of those things. Like, yeah, God's hand is in this. We can move ahead here. So, yeah. There is a house on the property that is in horrible shape, and we're currently trying to arrange with the Milwaukee Fire Department to burn it down, because that's the best way to get rid of it. Okay, this is the point at which I say I've talked a long time, and if you have questions, you can ask them now or anything that you want to discuss. Otherwise, then I switch back into my rapid fire, talking mode.
What is your position on, like we talked, end of life issues, perhaps, that so someone's being kept alive, the pull the plug scenario? Can you talk about that?
Sure. First, I would just want to say one of the things that you can download from our website, and we do have there's a printed copy in the folder that we gave to Pastor, is medical directive, a durable power of attorney for health care. If you don't have one of these, if you haven't filled one of these out, download it and fill it out as soon as possible. Pretty much anyone over the age of 18 should find this a useful and valuable thing, because this is the thing, a legal official document that allows you to designate the person who will make decisions about your health care if and when you are incapacitated. It doesn't step in while you are still conscious and, able to function. But if you end up in a coma, if you're in a bad accident, if you're intubated and you can't speak, you designate who's going to be making the decision on your case, whether it's your spouse or one of your kids or a brother or sister. This is the way that you make sure that it's not the doctors or the state or your health insurance company or that sister of yours who hates you and never would rather you disappeared. So this is something very helpful. The reason we make that available is precisely because these are important issues. And a lot of what people today in our society think of, oh, well, that's simple. I'm just going to do this if that ever happens. Those questions are never that simple. And as Christians, we recognize God is the one who has authority over the end of our life. And so we should not be in any way playing God in saying, okay, well, I'm going to be the one who decides when I go out, or things like that. And so, it's not like there's going to be a one-size-fits-all answer in every one of these situations. Just as a for instance, DNRs, do not resuscitate orders. This basically is a formal legal document that a person can sign that basically says, if my heart stops or various other things happen, then I do not want to be resuscitated. Do not do anything that is going to bring me back. Well, if you are a 88-year-old woman who's going through breast cancer for the third time, your health otherwise is not good, you are frail and weak, your faith in Jesus is firm and strong, and you are looking forward to heaven. A DNR in your case may make perfect sense, because what you would gain by being resuscitated is not outweighed by the pain and the trouble that would come if you were resuscitated. And so in that case, maybe, and I would certainly say talk to your pastor first before, doing any of this. That would make perfect sense. On the other hand, if you are 44 years old, and yeah, you've got some health problems, but otherwise you're pretty likely to be living, a decent amount of time longer, and your only thinking is, oh, well, I could just never stand being kept alive just by machines. And that's your only reason for, signing the DNR. Well, then you're probably stepping over the line into playing God and making decisions that shouldn't be made.
I guess I disagree. I don't see that makes a difference, right? One way or the other. If you make that decision, you don't want to be resuscitated. It shouldn't matter what your position is in this life. You just don't want to be resuscitated. So what does it matter what your role is in this life? One way, I don't understand that. That to me makes no sense.
Not playing God.
Well, okay. Put ourselves back 150 years when resuscitation simply didn't exist.
Right.
Okay? There was no choice in the matter.
Right.
Now, all the things that we can use today, or that doctors can use today, to keep us alive or bring us back to life, we recognize those as blessings. These are gifts from God.
Sometimes.
Well, let me finish the thought. We recognize these as things that, hey, this is good. My loved one would have died, but the doctors were able to intervene, and now I've got my loved one for another 20 years. This is a blessing. This is a gift. We recognize those as that. So if you flip things around and you basically say, because I don't want to live a certain way, those things that are blessings from God, I will simply view as bad things because they might keep me alive. There's something that is flipped with your thinking there. Now, I'm like I said, at the start, there's no one size fits all. And what might be suitable for this 44-year-old might not be suitable for that 44-year-old. Every case is unique, and that's why we always say, talk to your pastor. The person who actually knows you and knows your situation. You talk to him and talk through it first. And the conclusion you reach, might be the same as what this other person reaches, might be different from what this other person reaches, and it may be, in both cases, be perfectly lined up with God's word. But, in terms of thinking, okay, life itself has tremendous value because it is a gift of God. It is something that we are to be good stewards of. Well, that means that the Christian starts from that point and does not take this idea of, life itself is, just like I decide whether it's got value or not, whether it's got quality or not. That's not up to us. God is the one who decides this is a life worth living or this one's no longer.
Okay, so let's say you are resuscitated, right? So enough so that they get you to the hospital now, and you're on all these machines, basically so that they can harvest your organs or whatever, right? Because there's no brain activity. Now, do you consider that dead? I mean, where do you draw the line? What's dead?
That's not an easy question to answer, because even science today, medical field, it keeps changing their position on that. Because what they used to be able to say, oh yeah, this is dead. Now they're saying, well, actually, we thought that one was dead, and then he actually recovered. So, and it's very hard to define that, which is why I say it's going to be, every case is going to be unique. The general principle is life itself always has value. Now, if it's going to be, if resuscitating a person is only going to result in that person living for the next 10 days or 10 years, connected to machines, there's no consciousness, no anything going on there, well, that's a case where we might, looking back, say, well, yeah, then that resuscitation didn't really make any sense. The problem is that we can really usually only make that decision or determination looking back. Because if you're simply saying, well, this thing could happen to me, and therefore I am going to put in a decision that says nothing like that could ever happen to me, you're making a decision that's this big in anticipation of something that's only maybe this possible. Part of the reason why I'm trying to be very careful in the way that I talk about this is because, this is based on real situations, but I'm not like talking about someone's real situation. Say you are 50 years old and you go through a stage where you are just in horrible health. The doctors are saying, yeah, I don't really see that you've got much going on here. You should probably be preparing for the fact that you might not live another year. So you put in a DNR, do not resuscitate on your thing. Oh, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. You actually get better. And 5 years later, you have a minor heart attack. And you're in the ambulance. And the EMTs are saying, well, it would be a really easy thing for us to get her heart restarted and everything, this is a normal case. These are exactly the kinds of cases that people regularly recover from. Great. But you still have the DNR on your file. And they can't do anything for you because you've still got that in there. Yeah. And that's why I'm just basically saying it's something you've got to be very careful about. That you don't step into the situation of just operating on the basis of fear. I'm afraid of what this might be. when you could just say, you know what, I'm going to let that decision be in God's hands more. You know, that if he's saying, you know, I shouldn't survive this, then he'll make sure I don't survive it. But I'm not going to be the one who just cuts off any possibility of it by saying, no, this isn't going to happen. I mean, we've had people, you know, who say, well, I don't ever want to be, you know, connected to a machine that's doing my breathing for me. I don't want to ever be connected to machines at all. You know? Well, you know, some of you might be aware of this, that, you know, you might have an accident, you might, you know, have some surgery or something like that will require you to be intubated, you know, so that the machine is doing the breathing for you. But it's only going to be necessary for 3 or 4 or 5 days, you know, after which you will recover. But if you have predetermined, I'm never going to have that, then that's a medical thing that is not being, you know, you're not able to use in order to help you. So I have probably talked way too long on this, trying to.
But this sounds like, you know, it's really a case by case. It's something you should revisit for the fact that technology keeps changing,
Yeah.
and our knowledge of things keeps changing. Yeah, if you were in terrible health in your 20s, but you're great in your 50s, you shouldn't have the same
Yeah.
kind of write up for yourself.
I appreciate what you said, what's all been said. I think that it is a difficult decision, but the heart of it is we want to do God's will.
Mm-hmm.
And if we look at it that way, I mean, I can see from some of the examples that you've given, you know, a person who is relatively young with a lot of health problems that would maybe choose a DNR because they have a family where if they continued on that way, it would devastate that family. And so being a good steward to take care of the family that God has given them, they choose to do that. Or on the other side of things, what you've exactly said is, you know, then if there is a place, you know, where they can do more good. And then there's even more sides of it. You know, I had a grandfather that was sick and dying for probably the better part of 2 years. And for the last year of that, he sat in his recliner. He couldn't do anything by himself. Had to be taken to the bathroom, couldn't shave, which was utterly humiliating for him. But being a Christian, every time that I saw him, he said, I don't know why God still has me here, but he must have a reason. And the reason, I think, in retrospect, one of the possible reasons wasn't for him, but for those of us around him. I look at and I take an example of his faith, and as looking at that, here's a human being that could live that way and still have that faith, and it gives me an example to live by, which has nothing to do with his quality of life, because his quality of life was horrible. So I think it's really difficult, and I just pray that, you know, that in making that decision for myself and probably changing that decision for myself several times yet in my life, I will do so prayerfully, seeking what God would want me to do, and praying that in that decision, that if I am making a mistake, that Jesus has covered that sin too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's not easy.
Yeah, and that is something that a lot of people forget. I mean, obviously, if you are suffering, if you are in pain, or you're the one who is facing a horrible diagnosis, it is natural, it's normal for you to be focused in on me. You know, this is what's happening to me. But as Christians, we recognize, no, wait a second. You know, life isn't all about me. There are other people here too. And yeah, you know.
That's what a lot of suicidal people don't understand. It's all about themselves. But if you looked at it from the view of what others feel about you, think about you wouldn't think twice about doing suicide. No way. I'm going to ruin it for everyone by taking myself out of this world.
Yeah. So we think about, you know, others, and as you pointed out, you know, I may be suffering. I may be in awful shape, but it may be that God is using this to help my sister, my son, my neighbor next door, to live out his or her Christian life in a way that otherwise wouldn't. And we can't presume to know all that stuff. I guess we're close to the end, but
Yeah, just real quickly, there's certain things that have happened. First of all, I don't have one of them, because I think my kids will know the best thing to do. They're Christians, and they will know. And when my mother passed away, was sick, I mean, my brother, my youngest brother, did not want her to have antibiotics at all. She had Alzheimer's really, really bad. Well, my mother had never had pneumonia in her life. So I said I wanted her to be treated. Well, she died anyway. So there, God told us the answer.
Mhm.
And they often say pneumonia is Alzheimer's best friend because they swallow wrong and But so there's so many issues involved in that. And I know others, like a pastor that I had too, said his father or somebody he said sometimes we keep people alive and God doesn't want us to be us to keep people alive.
yeah, it is possible to err on the other end of things too.
Yeah.
When my mother was dying, she had ovarian cancer. There were 4 kids, and she had left the hospital and gone into hospice care. And there came a point where 2 of us kids were saying we should stop giving her the IV nutrition and water because it's not doing any good. And there were 2 of us who said, no, it's not time to do that yet. We don't want to starve her to death, because that would be actively doing something we shouldn't be actively doing. And as you can guess, there was some conflict between us at that point. God fixed that, because within 2 days, the doctor said, you can't give her any more nutrition because her body is not processing it. All you're doing is bloating her and making her miserable.
Right.
And we're like, okay, well, we know what the right decision is now.
Yeah.
It may not have been the right decision 2 days ago, but God has made it clear.
Yeah, right.
And that's the kind of thing, with so many of these issues, the key thing is leave God room to act. And that's what we were talking about with the pneumonia kind of case.
Right.
We left room for God to act, and He overruled and did things. But we don't want to act too soon sometimes. That gives Him no room to act. And sometimes, acting, we don't want to be so proactive with things that we don't allow Him the opportunity to work on us. Yes?
My feeling is, because my mom passed away, she was in hospice, this and that, which that would be 3 years ago. Between that and my sister with all her health issues and things, you could tell that God is in control. And prayer and talking to the pastor at that time, I think to help you to make the right decision or to help you to get through it, because in the end, God is in control. So lean on Him and pray and have Him help you to do the best that you can.
Yeah.
I always try to make this point that if you find yourself in that situation, maybe it's you, more likely it's going to be my mom or my sister or something like that. This really bad situation in the hospital, doctors saying, there's not much chance of survival. When you've got that situation and you're like, I don't know what to do, talk to the pastor. He's not going to make the decision for you, but he's going to help you through it. And maybe he's going to bring something to mind that you haven't thought of, or maybe he's simply going to be able to give you the peace of mind saying, yeah, you have considered everything, and now we move forward from there. But I've heard way too many, stories from pastors of, oh, hey, John, how are you doing? I heard your mom was in the hospital. How'd all that go? Oh, Pastor, it was horrible. you know, the doctors told us this, and, you know, and it was so, and he said we got to make a decision, and you know, and then we decided, okay, yeah, we're just gonna, you know, remove all that support. And I don't know, Pastor, did we do the right thing?
Yeah.
And you know, meanwhile, the pastor's like, I could have helped, you know, if you just said something sooner. And I'll just make one last point on this. Very often when the doctors or the hospitals or whatever are coming to you and like, okay, you need to make a decision now.
Yeah.
You don't need to make a decision right now. You know, very often, and sometimes yes, but very often it's like they want you to make a decision right away. But if you say, you know, Doc, I really need some time to talk about this with, you know, family members, with my pastor, and even to pray about it, and we'll get back. Is tomorrow okay? You know, very often you can do that.
Real quick, my dad, when he died now, he was in Rochester, and those doctors down there said, he can get better, he can get better. Well, we took him to Belle Plaine, luckily, and he got in that nursing home there, and they had a bed there. And the lady, the nurse at the desk said, I don't know how he can get better, he's got so many things wrong. Well, he was being fed through a tube, the food was actually coming back.
Mm-hmm.
And he had kidney dialysis. I said, I can't do this anymore. I talked to the pastor, and yeah, in that case, the food was coming up from there. I think sometimes the doctors don't want to admit that they could be wrong.
And
Yes, they have benign delusions of God.
And
Well-
what happened with me at the Mayo Clinic that time, I know the Mayo Clinic is a great place, but I was not happy.
well, there is sometimes that kind of God delusion kind of thing was like, well, I can fix this. But there's also the legal aspect sometimes, and like, I don't want to get sued, so I'm going to recommend everything possible here, you know, when you know, you might otherwise say, no, that's not necessary. Anyway, I know I've kept you past. I thank you so much for your time and your attention and everything. If you have anything that you further want to talk about, I'm not planning to leave right away, so, or unless you've got to kick me out or something like that, but I do thank you for everything. And, you know,
We're in New Richmond, Wisconsin. Is that a suburb, Milwaukee?
that's just a mailbox.
Yeah, I know, but I just wanted to know where their headquarters are.
To the extent that we have headquarters, they're in the area of Salem, Wisconsin, which is far enough out that it's not quite a suburb. but
Okay,
it's-
I'd like to. Thank you. Funny how you tell all that stuff when I was, years ago, I was working in my Paul, and you had that. And the films they showed back then. Abortion film. That's changed. But now, and the one in town, it's one had that so far from there right now. And so they've done a lot of good stuff. I don't know. But anyway, they've got one of the machines. They can see the baby. Yeah, that's right. And ours in here does not have that. That has helped them tremendously. And believe it or not, first the Catholic really.
They couldn't shut the water off because the
Now they
things
have
are
ones
pulled
that
off
put
with the
that
shops.
machine.
And I don't know where.
I don't know if
There
things
must be a
are going to
tool
change
somewhere
now
around
after
here.
jobs, but
Oh, yeah.
problems with the ultrasound
I think
approach.
it's.
Yeah.
And I won't presume to say it was everywhere, but in many places.
Yeah.
And they found that pregnant women were coming in to the pro-life center for the free ultrasound.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that they could find out how old the child was,
Yeah.
so that then they could go to the abortion
I know
center.
that she
This is
said
how
she-
they find the baby.
I guess I haven't checked.
They say, they claim they say quite a few
The last
by
time I
doing
checked.
that. A lot of people change their mind and they say actual.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, anyway,
I haven't checked.
It's
I probably haven't
This
this
week,
week.
but
all
since
the
the meeting, they all should be turned
and that flies when I
Check
get
Well, if it's something not coming.
At least a few more years.
in. Yeah, I've been doing that.
Okay, well, I'll check again.
Yeah, and it's from the young people. Go back. That's what
Nothing in the
Elton is.
notebooks, I'm not.
It is fine, it's fine if she has the answer.
People are
I
busy.
just would like to see,
Yeah, well, I can get a copy too, that's not, if she, sometimes she doesn't, I don't know where they end up going. I gotta know where it went.
I mentioned them specifically to the previous director of New Beginnings. She just left. I think that reminded me. I mentioned it to the
Same one.
I like him, I like that he stays apolitical.
Oh, really?
But he's big on helping people get out of their generational poverty. You're not gonna get an office job, you should go put pipes together and make enough to support yourself and a good home.
That's okay.
So,
Yeah, and telling people that, your only route to success is by going to college is not helpful for most of those people.
yeah, college aptitude or interest in it, but yeah, you get your hands dirty, wash and clean at the end of the day. My daughter is sick, I tried to get her in here, fertility treatments. We tried for 10 years. Finally gave up, went to a fertility clinic, and he had sorted out in 5 minutes. Just kept trying, praying, and referred to a friend that worked. He says, here's what's happening. It's your body tries, but there's a bone in your mouth. So every time it's an egg, the system will reboot. So there was no way, we didn't have any chance of actually getting the schedule, balanced it out, and it took another couple months trying longer, and then she was born 3 months premature. And it had been for a variety of incredibly expensive, complicated, incredibly and I was at the Christina being physically, mentally, every time. Physically and mentally handicapped were really high. Perfect. She's 3.
That's the point I was making about all these advances. It's impossible, 150 years ago, sometimes even 5 years ago. And, they're blessings, until somebody else comes along and says, well, I don't want that.
But the odds of her having a horrible life standard after her high kept her in there for 100 days, and I think prayer every day. She's perfectly fine.
Well, I agree with that.
And
There's a lot of that going on.
Tried to get her up because we were actually out yesterday, so she had a really exhausting day. So, okay, time for church. No! Full toddler tantrum.
Yeah.
Never mind, just never back to bed. That's. Yeah, what is the stand kind of limits on fertility treatment, that sort of thing? I know we weren't doing anything unreasonable. Her body is actively trying, but a hormonal problem is.
Yeah, I think something like that, we have no problem. Medical science can help you, get something back in balance or something like that, that's great. Where the line has to be drawn is when you're getting over the things, like IVF, where you are creating life, little embryos, in a petri dish or whatever, and then you're taking risks with them that are perhaps unwarranted, or you're even, saying, well, this is a good one, that's a good one, that's a bad one, so we're going to just get rid of that one, and we're only going to plant these or whatever, and that's where we definitely cross the line.
The ones that referred us, co-worker, his wife, they couldn't get pregnant, they went to the same doctor, figured out her ovaries hadn't fully developed, did not finish developing. so they got, it wasn't full IVF, how did that work? Harvested eggs set aside, planted one. They went blind. They went blind, and after that, the next kid, totally natural, was the pregnancy that kickstarted everything.
That happens.
The docs go, it does that sometimes,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it wasn't full IVF in a petri dish on the side. They had to, like, nothing left her.
Yeah.
They had
It's
to,
the intrauterine
that was,
something.
they didn't sort them through petri dishes, because
Yeah.
even they were like, not doing
Yeah.
that. This is gonna work right, or not at all,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, and when you're reaching that point, the next question is, a Christian on stewardship. Is what we're investing in this worth it? And it's going to be different for different people in different situations. Related to that is a question that, sometimes I ask people is, how much do you want this? Has it become an idol for you? In the sense that the be-all and end-all of your existence, and you will not be happy unless you have this. That's the point where, again, maybe you've crossed over. It's not, at that point, it's no longer about what method are you using. It's like, what's your motivation?
I was married after 10 years of trying, we got to the point where we should start maybe considering adoption, because this isn't going.
Yeah.
When the kid arrived. And we're going to work on the second here, and then after that, she's getting a hysterectomy because she's got a lot of health problems that there's like hormone imbalances. So we're I've been a little on the fence with him, but I can see how much she's suffering with it and having all that removed. Any thoughts on that? Really? Because it's she cannot have kids without help, period. And it's...
Yeah, and that's, again, it's the stewardship question. Is it causing more pain and suffering to do this? Well, then maybe you're going to say no. If you think that imbalance, it's like, well, she is willing, I am willing, to put up with this for the reward of, having another child. But if at some point you say, no, it's no longer worth it, then, again, it's that question of stewardship. You do everything with prayer, of course. You don't just presume I know everything. And certainly you get the doctor's opinions, and we're necessary the pastors. But again, it's one of those things. What might be right for you may not be right for somebody else in pretty much the same situation.
It's 70 degrees in there. That's what I worked night shifts for a lot of years, and finally got pregnant, and they started going bad.
Well, you weren't the only one. I saw people.
Pregnancy wasn't that good. She did not have a fun with that. And then early 1 pound was extremely
It probably
bad.
just gives an extra show to the.
And I was off of work for a couple of days. Sunday, I finally ironed it for the Sunday. I came back to church. I couldn't get in on Sundays because I was working.
Oh, I'm the opposite.
Everything was
I
just.
could.
But I talked to his hospital and Great Cross. Switching to the day shift, which I pretty much moved to night shift for where I worked at the time. But you could see that it wasn't going to work, so I moved back to the day shift, and I was coming in here, and this entire church service the entire way through, I stayed down there and walked back, and I'm the council secretary.
So that,
Actually, their room and bedroom are on the
Can I do like the bottom?
I think there's different that.
well, good. Well, you're more of my voice then.
It's a good one.
I know from what I've taken out when I did the basement, it was garbage. Like there's almost no R value do it for another week. Yeah.
We had a fun day yesterday, learning by the kids. And she asked to go to bed for a room.
Oh, that's always good.
Then I went to get her up for, okay, can I go to church? And full on toddler camp. And I'm like, no, never mind.
It always helps me because, like, when Emma's working, we have to take her going early. Like, I'm always like terrified.
Didn't seem
But like early, like, yeah. So when I
I don't know whether it's the godly or just me.
Hey, we're going to church. Oh, and these are my clothes, and I pick them out. Like, I don't even have. I like guide them. It's like, nope, you pick them out. As long as it's something that is looking okay, we're fine. Because then they're like, they wake up and they're like, oh, yeah, my clothes on, and they know about it.
And last time we had a date, no problem like this. This time around, oh my word. Oh, that is the.
You're infected. You've been groovy all week long. Finally, you starting to. I guess I'm gonna say it was. Now I felt bad that he was here. Need a hand?
No. Should be good, thanks.
So the State Department, I worked with a man named Joe Luisi. His dad was ambassador.
Oh, really? Oh,
They
really?
didn't know anything about it until like she walked down and left the car after that. But they just said, oh yeah, you got started ear infection.
Could be following.
That's easy, so long. I responded to Jay here because they said, let us know. And I said, you got some of the same stories. Because like, the symptoms are all the exact same thing as far as like food loss and everything.
Relax, things going on.
So, yeah, it could be worse.
Yeah, living overseas, you get stories. Maybe not so big in the moments, but later on.
Oh, yeah, but I don't think we never had a bad tale from anywhere. They got the car stuck in the Southern Africa. Not allowed to run the car in, stuck in the So Joe gets out with a group of soldiers. So they're all working even on this armored limousine car to get it out of the ditch up there. He gets back in completely covered in tar like mud.
Hey, Mara, please not.
Okay, I never put it in there. Forgot that it goes in there.
Okay.
I thought I was doing you a favor, I apologize.
It's good that I'm reminded of that occasionally.
I don't know. If you don't grow, if you don't grow at all, yeah. So don't grow anymore. Stop growing and you wear it forever. Don't ever use it.
It's not very life affirming.
Ready?
So that's working. I mean, it's plugging the back computer there, but that's
Yeah,
something.
must have been something with my setup.
I don't know.
I know when I was, looking for, buying a new one, that there were, some that said, this doesn't really work with a Mac. And that's,
Is that right?
it may be that was the issue or something, I don't know. So.
I was wondering about that, but you wouldn't
Yeah, you wouldn't think so. And sometimes, you know, it's just like they haven't optimized it and they don't bother. You know, and
Yeah.
something like that. happens.
Okay.
But thank you for your assistance regardless.
Oh, yeah, no problem.